Right, well, in a couple minutes, we're going to be in 2 Kings 18, and I believe it'll be up there in a few minutes. Again, it takes me a little bit usually to kind of get to that, but if you want to turn there or scroll there or surf there, or however you get there, we'll be in 2 Kings 18 here in just a couple of minutes, continuing on a series we've been doing on the Kings. Now, if you've been here for the series, you're kind of good with that. If you're maybe a visitor today, we've been doing a series on the kings of Israel and Judah. We have not gotten all of them. Depending on exactly how you count with like co-regencies and all that, there's something like 38 of them. We're not going to do them all, okay? So we've been kind of cherry picking some of them that we felt like would be really good for the church to hear about, and then also trying to pick some that are kind of the more major ones. And today, we're going to get to a man named Hezekiah. Now, if you grew up in a church like me, and if you didn't, that's fine, but if you grew up in a church like me, one of the jokes that people would do, when people took out a Bible and they'd say, hey, turn to, whatever passage, is it seems like Hezekiah kind of got picked on as turn to the book of Hezekiah, and then everybody, of course, starts trying to find the book of Hezekiah, and you can't actually find it because it's not in there, and then, the youth group leader, whomever at the front, kind of laughs about that and throws in the punchline about how nobody knows how to find stuff in their Bible, and all that. So unfortunately, there's no book of Hezekiah, but Hezekiah is interesting because he's got a long story, and it is recorded both in 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles and Isaiah. Now, we're not going to get to all those today, but it's pretty apparent that Hezekiah is going to be a really significant king in the history of Judah. Now, what we're going to look at today is we're going to look at Hezekiah, his life, sort of big picture, but specifically I want to try to look at different tests or different things that God sent into Hezekiah's life to reveal what was in his heart. Now, my full-time job, my day job, is that I'm a school teacher, so I get to give a lot of tests, and if I can let you in on a secret, even if you're far away from school and never going to take another test in your life, if I can let you in on a secret, most teachers do not like giving tests. And that may just be earth-shattering and rock your world. But let me explain it kind of from my point of view as a teacher. When I do a test, I actually have to come up with the test, I have to print the test, I have to figure out the test, I've got to plan the test. Then I have to have all these students come in hating life. Like, they're all just absolutely miserable. It just, like, they all come in, they're all ticked off, they're all nervous, and they've all got excuses, and it's just not a good vibe in the room, right? Then I have to hand out the test, then I have to make sure the students don't cheat on the test and walk around and monitor and do all that. Then I have to collect all the tests, and now I, as a teacher, have homework, right? Now I have to grade all these tests, which is not terribly fun. Then I have to post them online, then I'm just waiting for those emails back from moms and dads that check online, because that's not going to go well. That's not fun, right? And then in the next couple of days, I have to hand them back to the students who, again, know that it's coming back to them, so they come in with anxiety, and then some of them are happy, but a whole bunch of them aren't. Right? And it's not just the ones that failed. Sometimes the toughest students are the student that always gets 100s and they happen to gasp, get a 96, and they're ready to fight to the death, And anyway, so teachers don't really like giving tests. That may be news to you. Maybe you had an evil, sadistic teacher sometime that did, but teachers actually don't like giving tests, but we do it. Now, have you ever sort of wondered why teachers give tests? Kind of a profound question. Well, theoretically, if a teacher does their job well and if a school does its job well, a test is designed not to torture you, but a test is designed to reveal what you really know, right? And that should be the point of a test. It's sort of to show what you know, give you an opportunity to show that, so that theoretically we can honestly evaluate and say, hey, you did a great job, we can move on, or hey, you didn't do such a great job, we better go back and learn that, because if you fail this test, you're not going to do well on the next one, or whatever it may be. So tests are sent into our life to help us sort of evaluate what we actually know or what we actually believe. Now, while I don't want to compare God's providence necessarily to tests in school, because some of you are going to freak out about that because you hated tests in school. You had testophobia, which is an actual phobia. If you don't believe that, Google it while I'm talking, but it's an actual phobia. I don't want to compare God to some teacher and make you, start getting the cold sweats out there, but I want to use that as a little bit of an analogy for the way that God works in Hezekiah's life and for the way that God works in our lives. God does send tests into our lives. And while most often, if not all the time, they're not a pen and paper test, God sends things into our life to reveal to us what's actually inside of our hearts. Now, one of the last passages we're going to get to today, so don't flip over there yet, we're going to end up in Chronicles, where one of the things that God sends into Hezekiah's life, according to the narrator, the guy that's writing, he actually says God sent this into Hezekiah's life to see what was in Hezekiah's heart. So God sends tests, God sends things into our lives to show us what's in our heart, what we truly believe, right? So as we're thinking about tests and as we're thinking about, okay, tests and such, again, I think a lot of people think those are really, really bad things. But again, as we see in Hezekiah's life, or as we will see in Hezekiah's life, you can be tested with something really bad coming into your life, but you can also be tested with something really good coming into your life. And again, you may be thinking, man, I wish God would test me like that today, right? Yeah, I wish God would give me the test of managing $10 million. Let's see how that goes. But I think what we're going to find in Hezekiah's life, and unfortunately, David's life, Solomon's life, and a lot of the kings, is they actually do better on the tests that are difficult, the tests that are bad. Again, David's not my topic today. Solomon's not my topic or my main guy today. But think about David. David's greatest mistake comes when everything's going well, right? He commits adultery when he's back in the kingdom, relative peace, relative prosperity. That's when David messes up. Solomon, same way, has a peaceful time, peaceful reign. But again, Solomon starts to mess up when stuff's going well. So all that to say, I want us thinking of God sending things in our life like tests to help us figure out what we believe to expose what's in our heart, but I don't want you to only think of tests in a negative context. Because we tend to think of, okay, physically, for instance, a test would be me getting sick. Well, that's true, but a test could also be from God. How are you going to manage your good health? Are you going to use that for Him? Financially, we tend to think of a test as maybe a loss of a job or a loss of an investment or something like that. And while I would say that could be a test of God in your life, God could also test you by blessing you to see if you'll honor Him with your wealth. So again, it could be either way. So bring it all back together then. My main idea today that I hope we'll see in a couple episodes from Hezekiah's life is that we must trust God through all the tests of life. Right, so main idea, one more time, we must trust God through all the tests of life. Again, those could be good and bad things, and these are things that God sends into our lives to show us what we really believe. We must trust God through all the tests of life. We're going to see that Hezekiah does that okay at times and not so great at times. Now, one other piece of intro before I jump in, and sometimes I kind of like to front load some of the messages a little bit to kind of give us a lot to run with and then we jump in, is often Christians talk a lot about trusting God, right? Trust God, on our money it says, in God we trust. We kind of throw that around a lot, and it's a Christian cliche that sounds great, and even might kind of resonate in your heart a little bit, and you're like, yeah, I need to trust God more. But it's one of those things that I've found that we say a lot in church, and somebody's like, yeah, I should trust God, but then they go out these doors after I'm done, you pick up your kids, you go home, and it's really hard to sort of say, okay, what's different, or what do I need to do to be able to trust God, or how do I do that? So I want to throw out three kind of specifics, and then I promise we'll get to Hezekiah and I won't run long, okay, I promise. But I want to throw out three specifics that I want you to look for in Hezekiah's life. So we'll look at a couple episodes, then we're going to come back to him at the end for the application. Okay, so the main idea again is trusting God through the tests of life, but what does it mean really specifically to trust God? Okay, I've got three ideas here, okay? First of all, to trust God, I think, starts with obeying God's known will. So if we're going to trust God, it starts with obeying God's known will. If somebody gives you advice or if somebody gives you an order or a command or an instruction at work and you obey that thing, that is showing that you trust the judgment or the wisdom or the thought process of the person that gave you the order, right? So I think we start with obeying God's known will. So for instance, if it's in an area like finances, if you're thinking, okay, my finances are not going well, that's a test. Or maybe you're thinking, they're going great, but now Dan just said that's a test. All right, where we start with that, and I just met all of you, again, anxiety level went up. But my point is, all right, where we start with that is, am I obeying God's known will in relationship to finances? Am I stewarding it well? Because if I don't steward it well, it's implicitly saying I'm not trusting God. So we start with obeying God's known will. Secondly, then, to trust God, getting really specific. All right? We prayerfully seek God's wisdom when His will is not known. Okay, so if we know God's will, we're obeying that, but then there are times in life where we feel like we know God's will related to our finances, for instance, or to our health or some other area of our life, but then something comes out of the blue, the bottom falls out of life, and something really unexpected happens, and if you Google it or go to YouVersion and search for a verse on that, there's not one, right? There's not a verse on what to do when you lose your job and wreck your car in the same day or whatever happens, right? There's not a verse on that. So I think at that point in time, James 1 sort of kicks in, right? If you lack wisdom, ask of God. So we obey God's known will when we know it. We prayerfully seek God's wisdom when it's not known, because again, that shows trust, right? Think about, for instance, maybe something in your life, maybe a possession or something in your life that you have that you're not very good at. Maybe you are not a car person. Right? So if that little light comes on, you just freak out and you don't know what to do. Or maybe you're really bad at technology. So every time, your phone goofs up, you've got to, find a friend to fix it for you or whatever it may be. Whoever you go to ask for advice is showing that you trust that person, right? So for instance, if my phone is messing up and I think you know nothing at all about technology, I'm not going to run and hand you my phone and be like, fix that. Or if I think you know nothing about cars, I'm not going to ask you to diagnose an engine repair for me, right? So when we come to God in prayer and when we ask him, God, what should I do in that situation? Again, that is trusting God, because what I'm saying with my heart and my life is, God, you are smarter than me and you're wiser than me and you know the end from the beginning, like Isaiah says, and I'm going to look to you. I'm trusting you. So trusting God, obeying God's known will, prayerfully seeking God's wisdom when his will is not known. Then lastly, consistently honoring God with my life, consistently honoring God. Now, we tend to think of that as sort of like when I get a good outcome, then in my small group, I get to give a testimony and thank Jesus for what he did. And that's good. I'm not trying to make fun of that. But I think this is a consistent, ongoing thing, right? Am I consistently willing to say to God, either verbally in prayer, to other people, in my own heart and my mind, am I consistently willing to honor God? And say, God, my health, my finances, my life, my relationships, anything in my life that's a test, whether it's a good test or a bad test, God, you are most important. So if I'm being blessed right now, God, thank you for blessing me. Help me to use it to honor your name. If I'm not being blessed right now, for my frame of reference, God, help me in this sickness or in this financial distress or in this relationship problem. Help me to endure well and be a testimony for you, God, because you are more important than anything else in my life. So, obeying God's known will, prayerfully seeking God's wisdom when his will is not known, consistently honoring God with our words. That's how I would define trusting God really specifically. We're going to come back to that at the end. And I want you to look for those things in the life of Hezekiah. Okay, so one more time, key idea, we must trust God through all the tests of life. Trusting God looks like those things working together. Okay, we'll be in 2 Kings 18 here in just a second. Again, it should be popping up here in a second if it's not already up there. Okay, King Hezekiah comes to power in a difficult time in the history of Judah, okay? We've been kind of jumping around in the kings a little bit, roughly chronological, but the last talk that we heard was on Ahab, who is in the northern kingdom. Now we're in Hezekiah, who's in the southern kingdom. And I don't mean to confuse you, other than to say stuff has been happening in the kings. And what's going to happen is Hezekiah is going to come to power in the southern kingdom right when the northern kingdom gets annihilated. Now, that's not a great time to come to power, right? I mean, can you imagine becoming the governor of Virginia right when Maryland is just annihilated by a bunch of terrorists? I mean, it's kind of like what's going to go through your head? It's like, hey, if they can come attack there and kill everybody and, pillage and burn stuff down and all that, hey, I might be next, right? And I'm pretty sure their army may come back or whatever it may be. So Hezekiah is coming to power in a difficult time in that part of the world, but to take it a step farther, Hezekiah's dad, Ahaz, is not a great guy, okay? Not a king that loved God, not a king that does well. He does a lot of idolatrous stuff and actually tries to work a deal with the Assyrians who took away the northern kingdom. So if you're Hezekiah, you're not inheriting a great spot. Or to put it another way, in terms of our stereotypical Christian testimonies, Hezekiah did not grow up in a Christian home. We'll put it that way. He had a little bit of a rough upbringing, and he's facing challenges on day one. Having said that, he does really, really well. So I want to pick up here. I'm going to start reading in 2 Kings 18:1. We're going to look at a couple different things in Hezekiah's life. 18:1, 2 Kings 18:1, it says, Hezekiah, son of Ahaz, began to rule over Judah in the 3rd year of King Hoshea's reign in Israel. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 29 years. His mother was Abijah, the daughter of Zechariah, and he did what was pleasing in the Lord's sight, just as his ancestor David had done. Now, one of the things we're going to see in the Kings is being compared to David is like the best possible comparison. Okay? So to be said to be one that followed in the footsteps of David is to be somebody that's after God's own heart, and David is kind of the paradigm for kings that love God. Of course, we even see that in Jesus, right? Later on down the road in David's line. Verse 4, Hezekiah removed the pagan shrines, smashed the sacred pillars. And I like the way the New Living put that. Like, he doesn't just knock them down. Like, I picture, like, Demolition Day, and Hezekiah's got goggles on and a sledgehammer. I mean, he goes all out. Like, you're not putting this pillar back up. Not this one, at least, right? I'm gonna seriously mess this thing up. It says he cut down the Asherah poles. He broke up the bronze serpent that Moses had made because the people of Israel had been offering sacrifices to it. The bronze serpent's name was Nehushtan. Of course, that goes back to Numbers, but they'd started worshiping that. So again, he just smashes this thing. Like, Hezekiah is all in for the Lord. Verse 5, Hezekiah trusted in the Lord, the God of Israel. There was no one like him among all the kings of Judah, either before or after his time. He remained faithful to the Lord in everything, and he carefully obeyed all the commands the Lord had given to Moses. So the Lord was with him, and Hezekiah was successful in everything he did. He revolted against the king of Assyria and refused to pay him tribute. He also conquered the Philistines as far as Gaza and its territory, from their smallest outpost to their largest walled city. So Hezekiah comes to power and he's doing really, really great things. He's living for God, smashing idols, getting him out of the way, clearing him out, and seems to be blessed by God, but now tests are going to come. And that kind of seems unfair. Like when we read this, you would expect the rest of it to say, and Hezekiah had peace and prosperity for all his days, or something like that. That's not what happens. Hezekiah has been doing the right things. He's been following God, and it says he's devoted to God, but that doesn't make him immune from God's testing. Now, sometimes I think in evangelicalism, it sort of gets caught and taught that if you do what's right, if you read your Bible, if you pray, if you show up, if you give, if you serve, then everything goes really, really well. Now, hopefully we don't actually say that, except I realize I just did, but in a way to make you not think that was true, right? Hopefully we don't actually say that, but I'm afraid it sort of gets caught and taught, right? If you just check these boxes, everything goes really, really well. And then when something bad happens, then if we believe that wrong line of thinking, we get really mad at God, right? God, I did my part. I showed up. I read my Bible. I gave in the offering box. I served in kids' church or whatever. And all of a sudden something bad happens and we feel like we got a raw deal. But again, to go back to my main point, we've got to trust God in the tests of life, and God will send a test into our life for our good to show us what's in our heart and what we believe. So very quickly, for sake of time, okay, Hezekiah is going to have a couple of tests that are not good. If you're to look down a little bit farther, in chapter 18, the Assyrians are going to come back. The Assyrians are going to come back, they're going to invade, and they're going to surround and come up against Hezekiah and the people of Jerusalem. And Hezekiah is going to have a choice in that moment as to who he's going to trust or what he's going to do. Now, I would say, to go back to my other steps, Hezekiah has already been obeying God's known will, but here's where the other things are going to kick in, where we're going to see Hezekiah trust God during a test. He's got these Assyrians outside the walls, which again is no small thing. Ruthless, awful, terrible people that just annihilated the northern kingdom are outside of the walls, and Hezekiah's got to decide what to do. Now, while it's easy to sit back and say, yes, we would have had a prayer meeting too. I mean, think about that. Think if there was a raging horde of angry barbarians wielding battle axes out there. I mean, it's easy to say, yeah, we're just going to have a little prayer meeting and Jesus is going to fix it. I think some of us would have run for it. Some of us would have, tripped somebody else and run for it or whatever. Like, it's easy to sound hyper-spiritual here, but put yourself in Hezekiah's shoes. The Assyrians are ruthless and they kill everybody. Like everybody. And especially if you're the king, it doesn't go well for you. So again, it's easy to say, trust God, but Hezekiah is going to do that. Hezekiah is actually going to summon the prophet Isaiah. In contrast to Ahab last week, troubler of Israel. He's actually going to look for Isaiah and say, hey, come and help me. And Hezekiah is going to decide to pray to God. So I want to jump down and see how Hezekiah passes this test. Okay, so let's jump down then to 2 Kings 19. And again, I think it'll be up here, 2 Kings 19, 15 to 19. And Hezekiah is going to pray. Okay, so he's already doing God's known will. Now he's going to pray for God's wisdom. And I think we're also going to see this thread of honoring God. Okay, so I'm going to jump down, 2 Kings 19, 15 to 19, all right? It says, and Hezekiah prayed this prayer before the Lord. Okay, so Hezekiah is praying in the city while the Assyrians are out there and have threatened the city. He says, O Lord God of Israel, you are enthroned between the mighty cherubim, angels, angelic beings. You alone are God of all the kingdoms of earth. You alone created the heavens and the earth. Bend down, O Lord, and listen. Open your eyes, O Lord, and see. Listen to Sennacherib, that's the bad guy, his word of defiance against the living God. It is true, Lord, that the kings of Assyria have destroyed all these nations, and they have thrown the gods of other nations into the fire and burned them. But of course the Assyrians could destroy them. They were not gods at all, only idols of wood and stone shaped by human hands. Now, O Lord our God, rescue us from his power. Then all the kingdoms of the earth will know that you alone, O Lord, are God. So Hezekiah is going to pray this prayer, and he does pray for rescue. I don't think that's selfish. I don't think it's wrong in a bad moment to pray for God to help. But he's praying for God to help him figure this out. It's not I'm going to go try to broker a deal, or I'm going to try to do other stuff with the Assyrians. It's God, you are God alone, God, and you need to do this thing, God. You've got to step in. Yes, rescue us, but rescue us so that everybody sees that you are God alone. Now, again, for sake of time, I'll leave it for you to maybe read or look at, but basically God is going to send an angel that's going to wipe out the army, the Assyrian army. And it's kind of cool when Isaiah comes back and tells Hezekiah of what God is going to do. He says, not even an arrow is going to get shot at this city. And again, that sounds awesome, except I'm looking out there and I'm seeing lots of people with arrows, right? And Isaiah says a siege ramp's not even going to go up. And again, it's like, that's cool, but let's see how that works. And God's going to send this death angel that's going to wipe him out. Now, again, if you're Hezekiah, he's going to pass test number 1. He's going to trust God. He's going to obey God's known will, seek God's wisdom, seek to honor God with his prayer. He's going to do all that. Now, again, the next thing that's going to happen chronologically, again, doesn't seem fair because we would expect then, okay, Hezekiah's passed the test, check the box, smooth sailing from here on out. Again, sometimes I think we feel like that. God, I made it through one difficulty. Now, woo, I'm done with that. I'm good with that. Good to go. Never going to have another one of those. And we do. God continues to send tests into Hezekiah's life. For sake of time today, I'm just going to mention the next one. You can take a look at it later. But Hezekiah becomes very sick. Hezekiah is sick, and Hezekiah is told again that he is going to die. God's prophet comes to him and tells him this news. And Hezekiah, again, although he's grieving, turns to God and prays to God, and God is able to heal him and extend his life. So again, I plan to talk about that a little bit, but let's roll on to the last test for sake of time so I can land this quickly, all right? Last test I want to look at. So Hezekiah has passed the test of this invasion. He's passed the test of sickness, which you can take a look at later. The last test now is going to be what I would call a good test, if I can put it that way. Because we've seen sort of 2 bad tests, like army here to kill you is bad, right? Deathly illness is bad. And Hezekiah trusts God and trusts God. In this last test, unfortunately, he doesn't. So very quickly, I'm going to flip over actually to 2 Chronicles 32, so I'm going to skip a passage or 2 there for the people in the back. But I'm going to be over in 2 Chronicles 32 because it gives a little bit more detail in this same story. Right, so last test we're going to touch on quickly, and then we'll apply it and be done today. I'm going to pick up in 2 Chronicles 32, and I'm going to start reading in verse 24, okay? It says, about that time, Hezekiah became deathly ill. He prayed to the Lord who healed him and gave him a miraculous sign. That's where the sun actually went backward in the sky, which is cool. And I actually thought of this. That's kind of cool. I'm talking about that on Time Change Sunday. Not that the sun went back, but it just lined up. Anyway, that was random, but I just thought it was cool. Anyway, verse 25. But Hezekiah did not respond appropriately to the kindness shown him, and he became proud. So Hezekiah, who passed the test of the raging, angry Assyrian army, Hezekiah, who passed the test of a deathly illness and the promise that he was going to die, he passes those tests, but after this it says he became proud, right? He's going to become puffed up. He's going to become conceited. So the Lord's anger came against him and against Judah and Jerusalem. Then Hezekiah humbled himself and repented of his pride, as did the people of Jerusalem, so the Lord's anger did not fall on them during Hezekiah's lifetime. Then most people, myself included, think now this is the illustration of pride, okay? So here is how he showed pride. Verse 27, Hezekiah was very wealthy and highly honored. He built special treasury buildings for his silver, gold, and precious stones and spices, for his shields and other valuable items. He also constructed many storehouses for his grain, new wine, and olive oil, and he made many stalls for cattle and pens for flocks of sheep and goats. He built many towns and acquired vast flocks and herds, for God had given him great wealth. He blocked up the upper spring of Gihon and brought water down through a tunnel to the west side of the city of David, and he succeeded in everything he did. However, when ambassadors arrived from Babylon to ask about the remarkable events that had taken place in the land, God withdrew from Hezekiah in order to test him and see what was really in his heart. And that was a key phrase there that I brought up at the beginning, a test to see what was in his heart. Now, again, we've not got the time today, but if you were to go back to Kings or go back to Isaiah or another passage, you would see that Hezekiah actually has these guys from Babylon come in, and he shows off all the wealth, and he doesn't give God credit for it. Now, we read that, and we're like, man, is that such a bad thing? It's kind of like one of those sins in the Bible, kind of like Adam and Eve. It's like they ate a piece of fruit. Was it really that big of a deal? This guy, so he showed off some cool stuff in his man cave. He showed off some sports memorabilia or whatever he had. Is that really that big of a deal? And of course, the issue here, like the narrator tells us, the issue is not having nice stuff and telling people about it. It's the pride, where Hezekiah did not trust God well here. Now, again, judgment's not going to come on Hezekiah during his day, and overall, Hezekiah is a godly king. But I think like all the kings, we see a variety of passing and failing tests. Hezekiah mostly good, but again, not a perfect guy. Or like I said a few weeks ago, this is another passage I wish we could take that Sharpie and just Sharpie out. Right? Like I wish it just ended with Hezekiah did really well and passed all the tests and such. That's not the way it's going to end there. So Hezekiah, man tested by God, and a man that we can learn from to trust God in testing. Okay, I want to apply it very quickly, and then we'll transition to communion and be done today. Okay, so again, the main idea is that we've got to trust God in the tests of life, and specifically I'm defining trusting God as obeying God's known will, prayerfully seeking God's wisdom when we don't know his will, and always honoring God with our life. That's how I'm specifically defining trusting God. So today, how can we make that really specific, or how can we sort of put pen and paper to that, or stylus and tablet, or whatever it is you use? Like, how can we actually put that into practice? Right, here's what I would say. 2 applications for you today, and I'm done. All right? Take some time today to reflect on tests you are currently experiencing in your life. So take some time today to reflect on tests you're currently experiencing in your life. Now, again, as I said earlier, don't only think of the bad things. And I'm not trying to downplay that. Some of you, I don't know all of you that well, some of you really do have serious stuff going on in your life, and I'm not trying to make light of that. I guess what I'm saying is don't simply think of bad things. Perhaps, and again, I don't know all of you that well, but perhaps you just got a job promotion, a bunch of additional money, or perhaps, you're the story of that, great uncle like twice removed that died and left you millions of dollars, or perhaps it's something really great like that. I want you to think of that too. Think of the tests that God is having you experience in your life. Now, if you're struggling with that, maybe think of some categories, because some of you probably right away, you're like, okay, a test is going to be my finances, and a test is going to be my sickness, or whatever it is. But for others of you, if you're struggling with that, maybe think in big areas. Think of, okay, finances, even if it's kind of a mixture, how am I doing with that? Or interpersonal relationships, husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, parents, coworker, how am I doing with relationships? How am I doing with those things? But take some time to actually list those out. Maybe write them on a piece of paper, and then walk through those 3 steps that I gave you. So for instance, for sake of time, we'll just give one example today quickly. Let's say you're going to look at finances, whether that's good or bad for you right now. Really honestly, prayerfully ask yourself, am I obeying God's known will? Am I trusting God with my finances? Am I obeying what God says about stewardship or giving or proper priorities or whatever it may be? If not, honestly, you're not trusting God. And I'm not trying to give you a guilt trip, but that's a place to change that, right? To pray and say, God, help me to trust you here. Moving on to the second step then, that you're going to do with these different tests. If I don't know what to do with finances, if I've got an issue that I don't know how I'm going to make ends meet, or if I've got a big decision, should I purchase this home or car, or whatever it is, if I don't know what to do, now I'm going to commit this to the Lord in prayer. I'm not just going to think harder, work harder, surf the internet harder, trying to find that perfect used car, but I may do that as well, but I'm going to take a minute and commit that to the Lord and say, God, help me to find the vehicle or the home or whatever that you'd have me to have. Lastly then, again, with all these, come back to this idea of continually honoring God. So if you've been blessed financially, to continue using that as our example, thank God for that. I'm not saying that you didn't work for it, or that your great-uncle twice removed didn't work really hard for it and then kicked the bucket or whatever, but my point is not to take away from that, but God, who's providentially in control of all things, blessed you there. Now you're sitting and thinking, okay, I got you here, Dan. What if I'm not doing well financially? How do I honor God in that? Well, it's another talk probably for another day, but many times in the most difficult points in our life, physically, financially, and otherwise, that is your greatest opportunity to show that God is better. Because if you're hurting financially, I'm not saying necessarily be happy about that, but that's an opportunity to say to yourself and to God and others, I'm struggling right now, but Jesus, my ultimate hope is not in a bank account. It's in you. So you can honor God on that as well. So application number 1, really quick application number 2, but application number 1, take some time to reflect on tests, evaluate them by my sort of 3 suggested steps to trusting God. Last application, then I promise I'll pray and wrap it up. Okay, write out some prayers this week. That's application number 2. Write out some prayers this week. Okay, we spent some time talking about praying. We looked at Hezekiah's prayer. Perhaps you could go back and look at that again as an example. But take some time to write out some prayers this week. Now, again, you're thinking, you're a school teacher and you're giving us homework and you just like to make people write. Well, okay, maybe that's what I default to, but I found in my own life there's something valuable to really prayerfully, thoughtfully thinking about my heart and my heart's attitude and my heart's mood, and take some time this week to write out a prayer to God about your finances. And again, maybe that starts with, God, thank you for blessing me with the new promotion, or maybe that starts out with, God, I don't know what I'm going to do. But take some time to write that out. Again, seeking to obey God's known will, seeking to seek God's wisdom where it's not known, and seeking to glorify God. But take some time to write those out. Now, optional part 2, if God so leads, share that with somebody else. And I realize some of this may be private. I'm not saying you have to do that. But if God so leads, share that with somebody else. There's nothing mystical or magical about that. It's not a spell you're casting or anything like that, but it can be really encouraging to your brothers and sisters in Christ to hear how God's worked. Okay? So one more time, main idea today, and I'll pray and we'll transition to communion, but main idea today is to trust God in all the tests of life. All right? Let me pray for us, and then we'll transition to communion. Let's pray.